DJ Kid, this a hit for sure.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Pure Evil MMA. I'm your host, as always, Evil Eddie. Remember, white knuckles till the end. I hope you all behaved yourself because we have a lot to jump into this week. We're going to be doing a monthly recap show as well, starting, I guess, right after the main event this weekend on Saturday for UFC 330. But before we unpack that, we also have the recent UFC Vegas 120 results to go through, because there was a lot that went down, a lot of funny moments that went down. But before we even get into that, there is a lot that's unwinding this week in the MMA media circus. So let's jump right into that. We had former Pure Evil MMA veteran Billy Q that fought this weekend in the co-main event, which I was not really happy with the way that he performed this weekend. If you see on my Twitter, for those of you listen to audio podcasts, go onto YouTube and you can find us at Pure Evil MMA. I said this was the worst fight of Billy's entire career right here. He looked like a mid-level fighter with no defense whatsoever. Isn't like he gassed either. He just looked like he was stuck in the mud in round one and throughout the entire fight. I wasn't expecting a reaction from him, but he actually responded and said he was sorry. But we're going to get into that in just a minute as well. Shout out to Leslie, who did great on our UFC Vegas 120 Tapology, just getting one wrong. If you guys are on Twitter, go follow Leslie at LeslieGen_78. But before we even jump into any of that, we had Conor McGregor getting a delivery drone to him as he stretches out. Imagine being that multimillionaire, getting that much money and being able to get a drink over the counter just like that. But before we even get into anything crazy like that, Anthony Smith. You know, I've interviewed Anthony Smith before in the past. Great guy, great fighter. He's been out here since the Strike Force era. Now we see him from Happy Punch, at Happy Punch on Twitter. Former UFC fighter Anthony Smith is accused of threatening to kill his wife, forcing her into a vehicle and trying to run her over multiple times. Witnesses say they heard gunshots coming from his home as well. Now, if you guys have been following Anthony Smith's case, with him being on the podcast with Michael Bisping and all that, we kind of seen him like slowly unraveling. He even broke apart from Michael's Bisping and started his own podcast with, there's reaction channels going off on him, you know, saying that it's not that good, that the girl looks like she's been held captive. We've been seeing him slowly break down. And you could say, oh, well, there's Dustin Poirier. We could go back and look at tons of fighters that have just lost their shit, end up in jail, murdering their wives and what have you. I've even interviewed Frank Shamrock about this. A lot of his former opponents have gone down that path. But this is just so, like, how do you put this the right way? This is so concerning, but not to the UFC for some reason. They don't want anything to do with their fast fighters going and doing these crazy things. But to me, you know, seeing these fighters go through it to get to this point, they have no life after fighting. And not to say Anthony's that removed from the UFC or fighting in general. He had a great career ahead of him, great analysis, but he just slowly lost it. You guys can go on Brandon Schaub's show and pick apart him slurring words, this and that. But when you get to something like this is super serious. And it goes back to the childhood. I believe in CTE. CTE is definitely real. But behavior problems is something that these fighters probably dealt with as a young child. It's probably why they even started mixed martial arts. Now, if we go through the news even a little more, what do we have? But we have Heather Hardy, and I kind of got some slack for this. Heather Hardy can't even pay her rent currently. So this just in, Heather Hardy apparently needs help paying for rent. I said, how? a fighter like this, I met Heather Hardy at PFL, maybe it was World Series of Fighting at the time. A high level fighter like this, when I was working at Snipes, people who were working at Snipes even knew who Heather Hardy was because of the Netflix. You would think somebody like that, high level, big name, even before the Netflix, right, would get the attention, be able to go to a gym and train. But brain injury is a very serious thing. I released a thing on my YouTube years ago and also on my Facebook recently about the injuries that fighters get. As a matter of fact, let me just pull this up. I might have to edit this out, but hang in there with me. Let's see what we got in here on my Facebook. Just so I could play it. Here it is. This is a guy who's trained with NFL, NBA, MLB, Chris Weidman. This is what he had to say about brain injuries, because after a fight, you see all these fighters going out and drinking. Well, here's what he had to say about this.
The danger is if you go home and go to bed and God forbid you have a bleed, then you're running into some serious trouble.
Listen, I got one more question. My dad he's a construction worker. He got hit in the head. He was jackhammering, got hit in the top of the head, had a huge gash. Instead of going to the hospital, he went to the liquor store. How much damage, did he do more damage to himself by doing that?
Initially, he probably felt really good. Yeah. No, that's old school. But, it's, probably depends on what he felt like afterwards. It's not the best thing to go booze it up because, you're gonna mask everything and you probably dehydrate yourself as well. So I wouldn't recommend that.
You got to think about how many fighters out there are actually doing that after these big fights. They're going out there with these brain injuries, let alone a lot of them are getting sent to the hospital. But what do you do after? You splurge on food, you're drinking, you're smoking. Now you're seeing fighters smoking, this and that. But Anthony Smith, if you think about how long he's been in the game for, we're going back, he's probably been in the game for about 15 years now. This is really sad to see. It really is. And now you're seeing people like Heather Hardy. This is not anything new. This is not a new story whatsoever. So I've been getting a lot of backlash. My boy Steve from Combat Deviants, he says, so here's some of the comments here. Her brain injuries, this is from Tactical Aggression MMA, at MMA H Watch on Twitter. Her brain injuries are pretty extensive, probably to the point that she really cannot work when you look deeper into it. It's something to be concerned about, especially for her. Now, I might get backlash because I said, how? Could she just train young, inspired women at the gym and make a living at this point? Is it this laziness, or is this something to actually be concerned about? Now, if you look at that, you're like, a fighter being lazy. Think about all the years as a kid. These fighters were in sports as kids. You're having discipline, you're having self-discipline since the age of 6, 7, 8, 9. You're getting mixed martial arts. Then it starts getting very serious. Now money's coming into hand. Do I get a job? Do I keep fighting? Do I chase my dream? There's a lot of stress. Now you're getting hit in the head. You're getting choked out. You're getting swarmed by all of these fans. And then you get a couple brain injuries. And it could happen to anybody. But to me, looking at Heather Hardy, I would think the team around her, there's options, right? We've talked about this in the past with Ronda Rousey and yes men surrounding her, right? There should be a future for anyone that gets their foot in there, holds a gold medal, or gets their name out there. Heather Hardy, a lot of people know who that is. Where are the people around her not helping her for, paying for rent? You can't pay for rent. And that's just this month. 30 days later, you have more rent to pay. How is she not in there? Is it really this serious? And that's what I want to know from you guys. Let me know at XEvilEddieX. Moving further in here on the bookmark page, it gets pretty crazy. Islam Makhachev was absolutely shocked after finding out DJ Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson never even earned $1 million for a single UFC fight. You never make more than 1 million, bro. I feel bad for you now. This isn't that far removed from where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. Thank God for fighters like Francis Ngannou. Thank God for fighters like John Jones. As much backsplash as Dana White wants to give him, you know, UFC wanted to make a union. Never happened, right? But it's because of fighters like that. We look at somebody like Mighty Mouse, one of the greatest of all time to ever do it. And right now, Islam Makhachev is fighting to beat Mighty Mouse's record, I think 16, 17 fights in a row, 17 fights consecutively. Islam Makhachev has won. I think John Jones is at like 19. Anderson Silva's up there. But, you know, the title defenses, that's another level. But that many wins in a row in the UFC is unheard of. We were praising Khabib Nurmagomedov from 7 to 11 wins. Tony Ferguson when he was on 11 fight win streak. That was huge back in the day. For some reason, Islam Makhachev, the way that he responds, and you're looking at DJ. I would love to see DJ go up against Islam. Say what you want about the weight difference, but DJ's worth that kind of money. I'm happy for Islam getting paid that much, but it's just sad to see fighters like Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who never even got the push. You know, he would be thrown on these pay-per-view cards and Dana White would just cringe because they wouldn't sell. They would never sell. And Mighty Mouse Johnson would go in there and he'd throw a flying armbar and submit his opponents, and worthy opponents as well. You look at the division now and you're seeing all this pop up, right? We could screw up a little further. Davison Figueiredo, he's fighting Payne Talbot. That's another discussion that I want to get into. That fight is set for UFC 332 going down October 3rd. You know, with a fight like this, Davison Figueiredo, you look at him, you know, the rivalry that he had against Brandon Moreno, right? Very exciting, high level, fast action, top paced. Mighty Mouse was right up there too. And I'm glad that these fighters are getting paid. But you look at somebody like Payne Talbot, you look at where he's at in his career, a big star coming up, he's getting these finishes, a little baby face. But then you throw him into the deep end, you know, the management that goes on at this level, which is something we're going to talk about as we get into the card at UFC Vegas 120. It's risky because how many fighters have we seen go in there? What's a good one? Johnny Walker at heavyweight, going in there, defeating guys, knocking them out like it was nothing, making it look easy, right? Like we had in the main event this weekend with Gamrot and Salkiel. This is a scary fight because if you're in this position, it's hit or miss. And a lot of fighters will say, once you're in the UFC, it's a lot harder to get back into the UFC. This is a risky fight. If he wins, it will be huge, right? Huge win for Payne Talbot, but very risky as well. Let's see what else we got in our bookmark news here. Megan O'Leary caught in the crosshairs. People saying that she was on coke or something. Maybe her work schedule was a little bit too hard. And you see these reaction videos of just, you know, a 5-second clip where maybe her jaw's moving a little bit, her lips smacking her lips. Let's see what some of the MMA fans have to say, because we're past trolling. We're now to the point where it's just kind of silly. Carrie Stellar, homegirl for Pure Evil MMA, says cocaine. It's normal to have such a reaction when our name is mentioned. We are just too goddamn good. And the picture of Megan O'Leary should be on like Pornhub.com here. The kick memes. Megan O'Leary is officially sponsored by the Mac line. These are the type of things that we're getting this day and age. Ration Sports, she's fine. It's just really, really good card. As her eyes roll back as a Pornhub gif right there, and another Connor meme. But you know, Megan O'Leary, she's dating Joseph Benavidez. She just had a child. The work schedule is very hard, but we all love Megan O'Leary. We know the truth here. It's just nice to, you know, have a little fun. Okay, getting back to Islam Makhachev, UFC 330. MMA history today, been fan of them since I started in like 2015. Islam Makhachev is one way away from breaking Anderson Silva's record for the most consecutive wins in UFC history. He's huge favorite this weekend against Ian Gary. 25% of the fans out there are picking Ian Gary. 76 for Islam Makhachev. Now let me say this. Every single fight Islam has had inside the UFC, I have picked against this man. And he's proven me wrong. It's kind of the John Jones schedule here, the John Jones effect, right? you see all these stars, and not as big of the stars as John Jones went up against and defeated at such a young age, but still to that effect, where you did not think that this man would get this far and defeat the opponents that he's defeated. But here he is, one fight away from beating Anderson Silva's record. And I'm just blown away. And you have GSP saying, what's the possibility of this happening? Maybe he will eventually go up to 185 pounds to try to do a 3 weight class club. I do not want to see this. I've never been a fan of this. I want to see a champion dominate that weight class, focus on that weight class, because once you go up in a weight or down in a weight, you're changing the elements of your body. You're changing the way that you're consuming foods. You're changing the way that you're working out, practicing for fights, what kind of opponents that you're going to go up against as well. I would like for him to just focus. This is kind of the Mighty Mouse conundrum, right? Where you don't want to stay, you don't want to wait too long in that division. People are going to be like, oh, well, he's already beaten everybody. There's no fun left in it anymore. He's just too far above. And we saw this with Mighty Mouse. They made a whole season of Ultimate Fighter going up against Mighty Mouse, training to beat him. Tim Elliott was on there. Joseph Benavidez was one of the coaches as well, when Ultimate Fighter was coming to a close of what it was to be exciting. And I believe Brandon Moreno was also in that mix. Maybe Figgy was in that mix as well. But yeah, I'm not a fan of them moving up in weights. We saw what happened with Alex Pereira. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments or on Twitter at XEvilEddieX. Getting into some spicy news here. Another upcoming star dating Tatiana Suarez, Patchy Mix, who's missed his weight at bantamweight by 6.3 pounds ahead of his Risen 54 bout with Shoko Sato in Tokyo, who's also lost his last 3 fights, including his Risen debut back in March. Let's see what fighters and fans are saying here. I said, well, since 2021, he missed weight against Gallagher, and he won by submission. Now, it's a little dirty, right? Give up a little bit of your purse. I don't know how it was in Bellator, but you see fighters do that in the UFC. They get the win, and okay, we'll move on. I'll make weight next time, this and that. Well, then he pops 30 for a test against Magomed in 2024. After that, he just fell apart. Now he's going down to bantamweight and unprofessionally misses weight. It's definitely concerning, but what? He'll win, and then one word, we'll just move on again. But a lot of people on Twitter are saying Patchy's career since coming to the UFC is a disaster after disaster. And I believe he actually came out and made a response to this as well, apologizing to everybody about this. But we see this time and time again where fighters come over to the UFC. Even when I was interviewing Justin Gaethje when he was in World Series of Fighting, I was like, when are we going to see you come up to the big stage, fight some of the best fighters in the industry? And he said, well, not all the best fighters are in the UFC. It matters what I'm getting paid. And yeah, we saw 3 fighters from that era from PFL World Series of Fighting come over. We saw David Brantz, Justin Gaethje, and Marlon Morales come over, and they didn't have as much luck as Justin Gaethje did, right? It's just a tale as old as time that we've seen time and time again. Is it the people that surround him? Is it a mental thing? I don't know what's going on, but get used to it, because when you get to the big stage, this is what happens. This is what happens. All right, Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. It's now Wednesday, 11:16 p.m. here on the East Coast in New Haven, Connecticut. Bella Mir, Frank Mir's daughter, former UFC heavyweight champion, dominant champion, kind of sizzled out. Disappeared, right? He had the podcast, Phone Booth Fighting, great podcast when podcasting were just starting up. So my hot take is, it's been years in the making, waiting for this moment. We saw her as a kid in Frank Mir's corner growing up before our eyes. But is she ready for Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series? I see this a lot on the East Coast. We have fighters at CES. We have fighters, you name the promotion, right? Here on the East Coast. They go to Dana White's Contender Series. You get one shot. It's not like the Ultimate Fighter. And I'd rather be on the Ultimate Fighter because at least your personality can shine. But here in the Contender Series, yeah, you got a big name. They're not going to put her against anyone easy. This is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Now, she does have some prior, accolades here, as Bellamere is the 2026 NCAA national champion in wrestling. I believe the first women's, I forget, but she's 23 now, grown up before her eyes. I thought she was a lot younger than that. But yeah, it's a risky fight, and I truly believe that she needs a little bit more time. I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts were on this. And Rob Nakamura, shout out to Jay Speck, the host, on Twitter. She's ready to begin getting the experience needed to become something special, which I completely agree with. So my response to that was, I agree. She has a lot of talent, but who am I to say if she's ready or not? She's surrounded by Frank Mir. She's surrounded by the legends, right? So like I said in this tweet, I have a fear of seeing fighters with potential come up too soon and then just, falling. And then what's your future? You train your whole life to become a fighter. You get to this moment, you're so excited, right? And it just takes one bad knock, one bad loss, an embarrassing loss. And that's what people will remember you for. I'd rather see it in a different way. I just still feel like it's too soon. Maybe I've been away for a little bit too long and I haven't been keeping up. Maybe I haven't done enough research on who her opponent is. But knowing the UFC, it's the ultimate fighting championship. They're not going to throw you, popsicles out there. They're not going to throw you cans. And getting into UFC Vegas, we had Billy Ray Goff going in there, right here from Connecticut, out of Groton, I believe. He had 400 days off. I got 3 things of notes here. And let me just, there's not really much to go about for UFC Vegas 120. Let me get to UFC Vegas 120 in here. Gamrot versus Salakid, Pereira versus Billy Q, which we discussed, Elkins versus DeVale, Lemos versus Thearana, and Goff versus Miller. Now, Goff takes this fight. This is what I talk about with bad management. Goff takes this fight. He hasn't been fighting in 400 days. He goes up against Miller, who has a 5-inch reach advantage, 5-inch height advantage. It was just a mess. It was so hard to watch, screaming at my TV. Same with Billy Q. It was just another hard fight to watch where he just didn't look like himself, didn't look like he belonged in there. And yeah, there's the new UFC Apex, right? Do you want to throw that in there for discussion? They threw how many thousands and thousands of dollars into it. But it's still the UFC Apex to a lot of us, right? People are asking, do you think you're going to have a pay-per-view there? Do you think you're going to have a title fight there? We don't want to see, we want nothing to do with the UFC Apex. It could be fun for Dana White's Contender Series, but at this level, at this point in the game, we want nothing to do with Apex. We all have a bad taste in our mouth. All right, so let's just go right into it. UFC 330, Islam Makhachev versus Ian Gary. You guys don't like Ian, you don't like Islam, but this is a fight here where it does remind me of Khabib versus Conor McGregor. It does feel like something is coming together where they have this storyline that they're having to pick apart from the past. It's going to be a good fight. The build up for it, a lot of fun. But I always pick against Ian Gary. I always pick against Islam Makhachev. If I have to put my money on, and don't listen to anyone out there with these prediction shows. They don't know anything. They can look at the stats, but we all know the MMA gods are ruthless. MMA math just does not work. Ian Gary 17 wins, Islam Makhachev 28 wins. You don't know what's going to happen when you step in there. I would love Islam Makhachev to win. I would love Ian Gary to win. But for the story, for the UFC, I would love for Ian to go in there and whoop Islam Makhachev's ass. I just don't see it happening. Shout out to Mackenzie Dern and Jillian Robertson. Jillian Robertson, a former guest here on Pure Evil MMA. We've watched her rise, much like a lot of the fighters here, like Billy Q, Bilal Muhammad, Paul Felder, you name it here on Pure Evil MMA over the last 10 years. I'm excited for this one. I get nervous seeing fighters come up to this level, get that title shot. Tatiana Suarez, another one of them, which was another hard title fight to watch. I don't want to watch Jillian Robertson get dominated in there because Mackenzie Dern is one hell of a fighter. And she's been doing this since a young age. So I would pick Mackenzie Dern to take this fight, but I do want to see Jillian Robertson take it. All right, guys, that was a quick episode for Pure Evil MMA. I'm your host, as always, Evil Eddie. Remember, without evil, there's no purity. White knuckles till the end. Behave yourselves.
DJ Kid, this a hit for sure.